Hi, and welcome to the DM's Travel Book Club, a guide to the planes. Each episode, we explore a different plane of existence as outlined in the Great Wheel cosmology in the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons.
Woo!
One take, Hamilton.
I wouldn't call you that, but yes, well done.
No, unfortunately not. But there you go.
There you go.
We strive for perfection, and that's the main thing.
We do.
Mm-hmm. So,
are you okay?
Sorry, I had like a moment. What was I talking about? Yes, hi, we're welcome. I forgot that we're actually meant to then. I've done the intro, and I was like, I've done so well at getting the intro.
And then I'm going to leave it to Fiona to
and I'm going to leave it to Fiona to explain it. But Fiona, hi.
Yes.
How are
Hi.
you?
I'm very well, thank you, Hamilton. Thank you for letting me back on DM's Travel Book Club, even though I've been here for 6 episodes so far. And I'm excited because we are talking again about the second plane of lore.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed Arcadia, and now...
Yes, and we are in Arcadia, which is the greater good of Arcadia, as it's known.
The greater good.
Yes. It's a neutral, good, lawful plane.
Yep.
Which gets complicated when you get on those sort of the sort of northeast of them. But yes, so it's definitely lawful. It's definitely good, but it's sort of just on the edge of being super good or super lawful, like Mecanus or the ultimate good of Elysium.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting one as well, because again, from my very, very little reading and experience of this before, obviously preparing for DM's Travel Book Club today, looking in the DM's Guide 5th edition, there's actually not much on it again. It just talks about how Arcadia is just perfection. And this idea that everything works towards a common good, and there's like this flawless form of existence, and nothing intrudes on this harmony. And that's the kind of the gist, I guess, from what it is. But that's kind of it. There's nothing about what obviously the sort of plane of lore book talks about. So it was fascinating to sort of dive in and actually discover more about it. Because I guess the way to me, and I'm sure you'll sort of agree with me to a certain extent, Arcadia reminds me a lot of Hot Fuzz. Basically the whole story of Hot Fuzz. Where everyone is
much rolling, as we've got in the background, rolling British countryside and the sort of middle of nowhere there's something that I'm going to bring up later. I'm going to save that reference for later, but I think you might know the other TV show that comes to mind with a certain few of these things.
Ooh.
But I'll say it then. League of Gentlemen.
1,000%. It's League of Gentlemen. Yeah.
For the Americans at home, that's a very particularly British humour sort of sketch show. Go check it out. It's a bit weird.
It's a bit
weird.
Bit
of its time.
Bit of its time. But yes, this idea that this town, this place is working towards a common goal, which actually I would say happens in a lot of rural UK towns. Like there's the councils, they go, they work together. I'm thinking of Jackie Weaver and that whole council debacle they had.
No right here, Jackie Weaver.
You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver. So
we've mentioned her quite a lot on our show.
We are big fans. Yeah, we're big fans of her, and it's a reference that will never go away. But yes, so essentially this idea that where everyone's working towards this greater good, and on the surface, it seems, it must be good. Everyone's working together. But I quite like how...
As we both said before we even read it, it's way too... There's got to be something sinister going on.
Something's wrong with this. Something's not right. And I quite like that. And so I can imagine when we're getting players into this plane, it'd be like... You as a DM would be like acting all really lovely and everything like that, and everything's just perfect. And the players... Because the players are paranoid, even at the best of times, to go, something's not right.
Yeah, exactly.
You spoil
it's a bit like our Ted Lasso talk the other day, is no one is that nice. No one is that good,
without having an agenda.
Without having an agenda. Exactly. Well, let's jump in then to Arcadia. So now we're in Arcadia, in these lovely rolling hills, Fiona.
Beautiful.
There's a geography like all the planes, isn't there? I think we're being very literal with our background, which is all these lovely rolling fields. Well, that is the dark of it, as they say in the book. That's the chant. And the I think the thing that I always thought about Arcadia before heading here for the holidays, I realised that Elysium and I always thought Arcadia was going to be very much more. Now, these are the words I wrote down here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know these names that I'm going to say.
Please.
But I felt that Arcadia was going to be more capability brown. Right? Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I do know.
Whilst-
But for our listeners
Which I
who
will
might
need
not
to-
know it. Yeah.
Yeah. I will explain what capability brown is. A famous, very famous landscaper from the 18th and 19th century in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Predominantly focusing on changing up what used to be English countryside gardens, used to be very in manor houses, be very formalised, and so which is actually what Arcadia is more like, which is more like the Versailles and the European style of very much and Dutch gardens. It's quite a famous term as well, where there's not many, which we had a lot of in England's time. Very formal, arranged set pieces with lines of trees.
Yeah.
Whilst Capability Brown came along and tried to and part of that Enlightenment and that sort of the sort of noble savage. These are very conceptual terms of like the idea of beauty in the very much like the Japanese theories were coming through as well, of like wabi-sabi and all that stuff. So in that sense of like everything being about the incidental and seeming random and the chaos and the beauty and those sort of like the natural order of things sort of happening. So I thought that's what Arcadia was going to be, much more verdant, rolling hills, and it just being a tree here and a tree there, but it was just perfectly natural. Do you know what I mean? But actually, it turns out it's very ordered, but not in. And so I still think I'd keep Arcadia that way, but it's more like there are definitive lines of trees that are all perfectly the same height and perfectly arranged. There's a lot more lore in the geography of Arcadia. Than what I was expecting. And I guess that's silly of me to think when it's a law, but I was thinking it more like I thought it would be very much the perfect geometry and law of nature, whilst actually it's become a very mechanized, which we'll get onto later, form of law. So it's very much more on the law side of neutrality, which of that spectrum, which I think is interesting. Whilst Elysium then is definitely the more natural, very flowing, but a bit more extreme because of its chaotic nature. And so maybe we'll find out something more in the more conflicted places where we find that balance. Maybe there's a more neutral place. But that's what that was my first noted point. Elysium, more capability brown. Arcadia, more Versailles was what I wrote.
Interesting. Yeah, for me,
but I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I do agree with that. I always sort of mix them up with Arborea and Arcadia. No, because obviously Arborea is the chaotic, like, look at this beautiful land and this rugged landscape and stuff like that, whereas Arcadia, it feels like somebody's gone, well, this is nice, and as if you are being the creator in a Sims game, you know, this is perfect, everything is aligned, everything like that. Like, he even talks about in the book this idea that all the wildflowers, they're still sorted by colour. So like there is like a higher being or something that's organising, and that is the plane itself. So that's how I saw it as well. Yeah, everything
so OCD.
Is perfect. Yeah, pretty much, right? And like all the trees, like even the branches which stick out at angles, it looks like it's been designed that way. And that was the thing I got. This whole place has been designed to be perfect. Like as if you got out a ruler or a protractor, you would find the exact same angle on all the trees, and that is spooky. I think.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a video game from the sort of mid-90s, where it's like the trees are exactly the same cutout tree in a line. Yeah, and that's kind of what it's kind of weird, and it kind of at first I must admit that put me off it a little bit because it wasn't what I was expecting. In the sense that I was expecting it to be more. I was expecting to find this a place I was going to read and be like in this more. Actually, you're right. Arborea was what I also meant when I was saying Elysium, the two of them together, and that sort of idea of it being. Yeah, just more wild, but the lore coming from the sort of natural of things. But anyway, but then the grander scale of it then, so that's the sort of more macro design, the sort of it is then like all the other planes has multiple layers. However, unlike other planes that we've talked about, this has succumbed to a thing that we've mentioned a few times in other planes of it being an issue, which is that one of its layers has been transported to another layer.
to another plane completely.
Another plane, sorry. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is, it's just like, when you're reading it, you're like, oh my god! And you're like, what? And then you get to the end of the book, as spoilers, it says, you'll find us out in the next book. And you're like, no! You can't! Where's the clickbaity thing? This whole layer. Yes, there's 3 layers.
Clickbait in the book, basically.
Yeah, clickbaiting in the book. You know, the old-fashioned clickbait, when you had to read it. But yeah, Arcadia has 3 layers. And what is interesting, I'm sure we'll go into more the sort of topographical of it in a second, but it's interesting how, because of the loss of this 3rd layer that everyone's keeping like a guarded secret, the sort of the practitioners, the people who live in this land, are now suspicious of everyone. So there was a really cool little detail that I thought was good. So again, it feels very much like Hot Fuzz, that sort of nosy busybody asking what you're doing here, and everything's nice, and everyone is welcome as long as you believe the same as us. And all petitioners have this access to a spell called No Alignment, which they would cast to work out what alignment people are. But they see it as a compliment. It's like, oh, you're checking on my neighbour? Thank you so much for that. I'm like, what? That's crazy. This idea that you're snooping on someone, like, you know, because no matter if they're good or evil, it's in case they're chaotic as well. Because the idea here, chaotics are tolerated so long as they stick to the rules, because as soon as they're not, we'll ask you to leave.
So they say that the petitioners and the people of the land have sort of 3 reactions. It gets different in different layers, but in the general layer that most people arrive at, which is the 1st layer, which is known as a bello or beio. I don't know if it's the L is a Y.
I thought it was abellio. So yeah,
abellio.
I think,
because I was wondering if it was a beio. But no, that's a bit weird. I don't know, maybe. But abellio, where they say there's 3 reactions. One is if you are perfectly of the plane, then you just are seen as another newcomer. Welcome, hello. Then the second is if you are good, yet more chaotic or neutral, they will be friendly enough, but be very wary of you and sort of tolerant. And probably try and get you to leave as soon as possible. But and if you're evil, you get attacked. And that's it, because they are staunchly, and they see it. And it's interesting because it does talk about it a few times, and we'll talk more about the people a bit later, but it does talk about, like, it tries to explain that sort of aggression, because people as like, it's for the greater good. So it fits with the plane's concept, because it's law over good. And so the law is that it's good, and a good for the greater good. So you will do bad things that we consider bad, like attacking people and killing people potentially, because you are protecting the land. Not that I totally agree with all the theories behind it, because the greater good is a concept that's very it's a whole different podcast.
Well, but I can quickly talk about it though, because whilst you did sort of architecture and stuff, I did philosophy. There you go. And I did my dissertation on Jeremy Bentham, who's did a theory of greatest good for the greatest number. And originally it wasn't an ethical theory, which most people will know it for now, but it was a political theory. So this idea that all laws of a land should be aimed at maximizing the greatest good for the greatest number. And which you think is a good idea. Like, you're like, yeah, that makes total sense. But actually that means those poor books that are, aren't a part of the greater good. They're like, oh, oops, they get the raw end of the deal. Yeah. And it's interesting, again, a quick side note on that, just to sort of finish this bit off, was that they tried to bring back happiness surveys, obviously, when we had David Cameron as the UK Prime Minister. But they justified it as like, well, we can quantify happiness now. So that's one of the reasons they said, like, well, happiness, we can't quantify it. And they said, oh, we can now with surveys. But also, it still leads to the same problem, because, like, it's, you're still... The people that aren't happy, the small number of people that aren't happy, they're going to be even worse off. So it was just interesting how that theory always comes back around in different.
It does, and it's been tried and tested in lots of other philosophies and stuff in the past. It's a thing, and it's, as I said, well, maybe if you're in a philosophy podcast is on the cards at some point.
It's been over a decade. I think I'm okay with D&D.
And anyone who's a Warhammer fan out there will know that is the theory behind the Tau Empire, is all about the greater good. That is their main philosophy. So if you're a Warhammer fan, this is their land. So the other term for the place is called the Land of Perfect Good, as it's also known. So I'll go through the layers as well. So we were talking about Abellio, which is the 1st layer. And then the second layer is known as, it's coming up when I get there, when I can find it on my screen, Buxenus.
Buxenus, yes, Buxenus.
Or Buchenus, depending on if you do the X with the ch sound.
Yeah, I don't know. I always say Z,
Catalan.
the books. Anyway, Buxenus.
Well, I was just wondering because they could be quite Hispanic sounding. Because I was thinking of the double L with the Y, Bello, and then Buchenus. But I've not heard anyone again. Pronunciation guides. Would help. But Buxenus, let's say, for now. And then the third layer, which we will come onto into more detail, which is known as, and again, is Nemausus.
Yeah, Nemausus is what I thought it was as well. This and what was interesting, it talked about, if we're going to do geography of it, this idea that it's actually like a slope. So you have the Abellio at the top, and then as you go slowly down, you then go into Buxenus, and then you go into Nemausus, or where it used to be. This idea that everything's on a slope, I just thought it was really cool. Just for miles around that, you're at the top and you're looking down, and it's just a gentle slope all the way down.
And the layers work in a very interesting way. Additionally, which people relate to where they live, relates to their relationship to the plane. So I don't know how much we've talked about this in the rest of the shows, but obviously the people that end up in these planes as inhabitants are generally people who worship the gods or have alignments that relate to the alignments of the plane. And so when you arrive at this plane, you have probably passed away, and this is you're now moving into your petitioner phase, which is when you become one with, and then you aim to live here and become, and don't have to die, you can come there generally, just come there along and become a petitioner and become one with the land. And so as you become more one with the land, there's a few things that happen. One is as you level up, because we're playing that sort of game, you get to a point where your standing and relationship to the land becomes more akin to it, and therefore you then move on to the next layer, and then further on down, which makes this loss of the last layer, as we said, to Mecanus, very much more nerve-wracking, because this is where people want to go, and it's caused a lot of confusion because people have moved to the end plane and are now stuck in another place, or because there's not enough room for everyone, there's people that are like, I'm ready to move on, but I can't move on. So it's causing overpopulation of areas, which means that there are people just mixed up, which is quite interesting. Additionally, the sort of the layers change slightly in terms of their sort of politics of them as well. So the main layer is more about working the land and sort of being a part of the land, whilst the second layer is much more an aggressive land, let's say. It's as they call it, the second layer is a mustering ground where the forces of Arcadia gather their might for yet another attempt to take back the third layer. So it's become this sort of war land, a little bit like a sort of like barracks and encampment of the more staunchly focused to their land place. And we'll come on to the residents.
It feels like, I just feel a bit like a mixture of, say, like Yizgard in the way that I did, like, haha, glory! We'll get them back, we'll get it back. It feels very much very pomp and circumstance that maybe, say, UK in the World War I, and I'm sure other places around were like, yes, we'll be home by Christmas, lads, that sort of thing. That's the attitude I see it there. But obviously, as we keep hinting to, it's not always not what it seems, which I think is great. And just to quickly go back to what you're saying about the petitioners thing, that idea that they connect with the land. So one of the big examples of that is age. So when they're on the first, the Arbelio, they're usually between 19 and 25 or something like that. Oh, how lovely! And then older, you go to the second layer, and then it's like 45 plus. You go to the third layer. But then because that's just the way you age, and that's just a natural process.
Actually, your power increases. So there's a lot of that chat in this one about sort of deception of age and the sort of wisdom of age being quite important, which I think is kind of interesting. I don't know, it doesn't really play on it, but it's there as a theme that runs through this thing of like, there's the mage that we'll talk about later, which is a level 21 wizard, but always comes across as like uses their age to sort of hide them as decrepitness. So they want to test people's sort of like goodness and their sort of understanding and their sort of intelligence to sort of realize. So it's quite it's just an interesting theme that's actually not a major theme, but it's definitely in there a bit.
And I think that does play back to that whole, like, again, I know, and then this is a British show, we are two British people. It feels very much like rural villages where
it does,
young
yeah.
people will move in. I say young people as if like I'm a young person. I'm not.
Oh no,
anymore.
young, just JDLs. That's just
Dude.
down from London's.
Just down from London's. Yeah, so, you know, we will move to these places or go back to visit of that. And then there is that sort of distrust. You're like, oh, why are you here? That sort of like, so I actually feel that quite a bit, you know, it just because, and
you know,
I'm sure
they're doing up number 5. Oh,
yeah.
I know they're doing
it's
number 5.
gentrified
What
again.
are they doing?
Yeah. Absolutely. But I guess let's just talk about, because we're still a little bit on geography, let's talk about seasons and the idea of they call them, I think it's the storm kings or the storm leaders or something like that. But
this is one of my favorite, like, I thought it was such, there's a really great system they've set up, I think, and it was like this is what I was reading, and I phoned up Fiona a couple of days after reading this bit and said to you, like, oh, you know, Arcadia I thought was going to be so like dull, and you know, the thing that's so much a shame about the current DM's guide is that it says like a paragraph on this that has these amazingly awesome kings and queens, as they should just call them, because 2 of them are queens. That are, you know, just all this lore. It's kind of really well thought out, well, really interesting. So anyway, yes. Do you want to talk about them?
I'll quickly talk about them. So yeah, so the big thing you need to know about really is that first layer, the Arbelio. There is, first of all, a huge big orb at the top, at the center of it, and this dictates night and day. And like all things that are ordered, there's no twilight, there's no dusk. It is basically, it's daytime, nighttime, daytime, nighttime. And it's I loved how in the book it talked about you have 2 rounds of disorientation because you can see that
that's highlighted on here. Anyone who's not used to it,
yeah, this idea that you can, it's the sun's coming up. Ah, okay.
Exactly.
It's like,
it's like that driving through tunnels is what it reminds me of. It's that sort of like if you drive through tunnels in like Italy or something like that, or south of France or whatever, and you come out and it's that blinding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing on that. So that daytime and night are sort of ordered and sort of ruled over by this orb, and then the seasons as well. They have obviously 4 different seasons. They get 3 months each of 27 days, and again it's abrupt. So, but like, it's the last day of autumn, and then the next day, snow. But it's all regulated, so the snow doesn't build up. It's like, it's there on the ground. You go out and go, what's that noise? And there's a whole bit of snow falls on you.
It's like a stage set sort of like thing, isn't it? It's very much like that. Yeah. You turn the corner and it's just like the scene in it's the scene in Notting Hill.
Yes,
it's the scene in Notting Hill. When it does the sunshine when he's gone. And it changes the seasons.
Anyway, so that's the thing. So you've got all these regulations, all about the things, and then you get the Storm Kings, or it does say, I will say in the 5th edition, it does say King and Queen. So you have these 4 different sort of almost like they're like allied demigods or creatures that have got into this status, called the Storm Kings, and they have citadels that are almost like compass points, equal distance from this orb. That's why I sort of mentioned it. And these citadels are super high and obviously perfect for, like, if you're like, well, we need to go see the Storm King, or we need to go see the Wind Queen, etc. So yeah, you have the Cloud King and the Wind Queen, the Lightning King, and the Rain Queen.
Rain Queen, yeah.
And it's interesting because they all need each other. They're sort of working together, and it's interesting. So you think like the cloud and wind elements, they're not seen as important, or because no, that's not true. They're working all the time because there's always a wind somewhere. There's always clouds and stuff like that. But in order
they need the wind to push the clouds. The clouds need to be there to be able to drop the rain, and the lightning needs, and it's all those things.
It all comes together. So that's the thing. So those are, I think, the Cloud King and Queen are the most hardworking, even if they're just on in the background. And then you have the Lightning King and Rain Queen are also working as well, and they all each have their individual personalities as well. What I did find was interesting because typically I'm like, well, what happens when one of them dies? Because always
every player's like, can I kill it?
Can I kill it? I want to be this.
It's like, will it blend for D&D? Is will
it die? That's a whole different segment. It's like, will it die? And then you can imagine if we do legendary monsters and it goes, maybe, It comes back after 7 days, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so they train up acolytes. So if one of them should pass for whatever reason, then somebody else can take over the job and still have the knowledge of doing that as well. So you have 4 different sort of like rulers essentially that control weather on this plane. And the other thing I did want to mention, because that mentioning about the seasons before, is that the seasons are opposite on the first 2 planes. So if it's spring in the first plane, then it's probably going to be winter in the second plane, and all that sort of vice versa. And it's just a way to, again, I just think that's really cool.
Spring and autumn, winter and summer.
That's it. That's what it was. Sorry, my bad. So yes, spring.
I was confused. I was like, wait, that's not right.
Yeah, I mucked up there. So yeah, spring and autumn, and then summer and winter. But that's again quite cool, because you could go to the edge of where these layers meet, because there are distinctive gateways and roads everywhere, that you can look into the next layer where it starts and just see it's all the weather. It's like almost like the line is drawn of where you were stepping into the fall of the leaves and all that sort of thing. You can actually see that. So I just thought
roads,
cool.
whilst you're on roads, there is a very interesting condition that if you know the right path key, a series of words or phrases, you can step on a road and it will take you directly to where you want to go.
I like that.
Anyway,
compared to all the other places where it's like, what was it, like
you have to use your brain, or it makes it worse.
or you get a guide who's the only one that knows where, and even then it's not any good, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing to talk about roads very quickly, is that everyone uses them. Because obviously it's the most lawful thing to do, because why would you not use them? So if you if you go frolicking in a field, running through fields of wheat, etc., people are going to question it slightly, like, what are you doing there? So again,
that's a bit too chaotic.
Honest, how cool is that? The idea is like, well, we all I love the idea that you get done for jaywalking.
But it's so that sort of place, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's that village. Oh, it's like it's a little bit like that Nick Cave song, which is all about like a really like quiet village, actually. But then it's also got sinister undertones because it's Nick Cave. But it's like it's kind of that sort of. That's what it makes you think of. It's like no jaywalking. It's Pleasantville, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Pleasantville. Absolutely. Is that idea that everything is great? You're so welcome here as long as you follow the rules and you believe and you do exactly what we do. Okay. And it's that horrible. There's no individuality, there's no uniqueness in a way, that everything is working towards a common goal. So interesting.
Exactly. So should we move on to the people and the places they inhabit? So next, yeah?
Let's do it.
So on these planes, who lives there? Who lives there? Who lives here? Well, I can start with some people. We mentioned the main ones are the proxies of the powers. So, but it's probably worth starting with the powers themselves that attract these people. So we've got Japanese gods of Izanagi and Izanami, which are powers of land and creation. You've got Lu Xing, which is the power of bureaucrats and rewards, so which is also part of. We talked about the bureaucratic, the great. I can't remember what the term is, but the grand bureaucracy, which encompasses the judgment, which we mentioned in the in where were we last week? Where we were last week.
Arcaron. There you go.
Yeah, and then also in the Outlands as well, and so that's part of that greater system. And then we've also got some of the they call it Heliopolis, which is actually which is known as the Egyptian gods of Ra, Osiris, Isis, and Horus are there. We then also have Azuth, I think, which is the power of energy and mages, not magic, which is important. And is a demi-power. And then we've also got some dwarven power. We've got the Clangeddin Silverbeard.
Clangeddin Silverbeard, which is a fantastic dwarven name. Love it.
Yes, and also Reorix, which is the patron of dwarves in Kryn. And then Meriada, which is basically this is where we're going to hit some old school D&D issues. So we're just going to say that it's obviously where there's the old school having to have evil races.
Yeah, quotation marks. Yeah, and
Meriada was the god of those that became good from the evil races,
which is a bit like, no, okay.
Yeah.
So
it's that bit of old school D&D that you just have to skip over.
Acknowledge and go, not for us.
You know what I mean? Acknowledge and say, yeah, there we go.
I agree.
Have to dwell on it for too long, unfortunately. So it's, but yeah, so those are the powers, and so their proxies live there. And so on the main, we have them dotted all about. We also have a thing called the I'm going to get this wrong. Einharia?
The what, sorry? Sorry,
the Einraria. I don't know how you pronounce the EIHENRIAR. The roving patrols.
Oh, right. Yes, the roving patrols. That's all I call them. I don't. Yeah. The Ironheart? I don't know.
Ironheart? I think that's it, isn't it?
I don't know.
It's the one
pronunciation guides.
Yeah, but people join these roving patrols, which is what you see all around, who are trying to protect the land. As we said, people that are trying to keep the land from evil, and they are made up of all the people and races of it, of the land, and they sort of rove around and they go everywhere. Additionally, but they're sort of a group unto themselves in a sense, like they're not specifically tied to one location. Obviously, more in Abellio than they are anywhere else, because it's about the entry points. And then the Harmonium, which is one of the factions we've talked about in Sigil, which is the faction, basically the police and
force,
jailers of Sigil. And they're up to no good, basically.
It's
ironically a good place.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about those roving sort of bands of what I would consider maybe vigilantes in a way, but compared to that to Arcadia, which obviously had those all war bands that are fighting. So it's interesting to have that comparison, I guess, because obviously they're like, well, we're doing what's right, and this is important to us, for the greater good. Whereas on Arcadia, they're fighting because they don't know anything beyond that. It's like for them, it's just go. It's not for a greater cause. It's just like, this is all we know. So I think that's just a really interesting comparison that I hadn't really considered.
Yeah. Exactly, and I think that's it's an interesting. I think it is D&D, and therefore it talks about conflict quite a lot. And even though these are not the planes of conflict, there is always conflict ongoing. But it's showing us throughout all of these, as you've just mentioned, like a different way of why conflicts occur, which I think is actually quite interesting in some ways. I don't know. It's just another. That's kind of what I'm enjoying about the planes books, is because they are quite philosophical, and there's something in them which is actually someone's really looking at all these different concepts that we're hitting on,
I agree.
But in different ways.
It's a different way to have adventures, I think, for your party. That's because obviously if you take everyone here to Arcadia and you're like, something's not right. There's something, but we can't. We've got to follow the rules and stuff like that. What's interesting about the gods you've all just mentioned? Obviously, there's loads and loads of gods, all different sort of pantheons, all from in both in the real world and obviously from D&D. None of them fight or squabble. They all sort of just get on. Even though their ideas of good are different to one another, they just get on and do stuff. And I thought that's really interesting. There's the squabbles happen between their proxies and their petitions, but neither of them will go to war against each other. Again, compared to Arcadia, where obviously you have
it's just literally
war between all the deities there. So I was just like, that's interesting, that because there's so many deities here compared to other planes we've looked at, and yet they all get on. So
and just to remind people of the difference between powers, proxies, and petitioners. Powers are the gods. Proxies are the sort of leaders that the powers put in charge of their realms on their behalf, and then the petitioners are the people who are their believers who live there. Just to clarify, in case because we talk about it a lot, but it's worth reminding people every time.
It is.
So the people of the town. So the other peoples that are interesting as well as and I didn't know these things. The name of these, the Formians, before.
Yeah, I looked them up. I was like, what is this? And I was like, whoa, I've never heard of these creatures before.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, I'll quickly talk about it. So this refers to a town called Mandible, which should give you a massive clue of what the people in it. And it's just this idea: it's a highly militaristic sort of hive city inhabited by these creatures, which are basically almost like they're ants, essentially, like sort of standing upright ants. And it's the it's on the first layer, and it's their sort of main trading location. and there's a whole little story in it. I really enjoyed this actually about the Queen Mother
story, yeah.
having, obviously sort of raising up 3 daughters, and before any of them could take over, she's like, I will send you out into the world so you can complete your training. And of course they never come back for various reasons and stuff. And I like that the idea that there's this control, again, a political thing, this idea that, well, it's for the greater good that you go out and we should share our practices with other people, and not that you take over my stuff. Bye. That's sort of...
Exactly. It's really it's very, just a lovely little intrigue. And they've got, and with all of these places, they've got a thing called like the dark, or behind the throne, which is always quite interesting, or the sort of local news, which is always like gossip. So there's always little fun things in these books, just to get you, just if you don't want to, just to give you something to start with when you enter these towns. It just made me think of Stoke Mandeville. That's why, I don't know, because of Mandeville, and I was thinking of English towns, and that's what just came to my head. The next one then is Marduk, which I thought was cool because it involved dragons.
I knew Mr. Dragon DM over there. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But I love the intrigue in this one. So Marduk is another realm, and the character of it is noted as, order is nothing without beauty, and there is no beauty without order. There's good and evil in everything, but with the proper control, only the good is nurtured while the evil is left to wither away. I don't know, it's just kind of like, they're sort of so like subtly quite scary places, aren't they, in some ways? Do you know what I mean? But Marduk, who is the ruler of Marduk, the realm where the city of Marduk lives, so he's not an egotist. No. The binder of dragons controls this realm. He's a power with 4 eyes, 4 ears, and a mouth that shoots flames when he speaks. And it's said that he and Tiamat each emerge from their lairs every 100 years to wage war on each other, which I quite like to determine who rules the next century. But the interesting thing about this place is that this Marduk character, as the binder of dragons, if a dragon or a dragon kind comes into this town, they lose all their power, any of their abilities. Which, like, no ability, which is an interesting concept. Yeah,
they're not even allowed in, are they? They're just sort of like...
Well, if they're in, if they're good aligned, as it says, they're good aligned, then they are very quickly chased to the edge of the town. And if they're evil, they're fought on. Again, it's a similar sort of thing, but they definitely, But there's this whole, like, it's one of the most beautiful in the plain. It has these rivers that wind through it, and it's got these, like, overly maintained spaces, and it's like beauty is the ultimate goal of this place. But the dark of it is, the chant, as they say, is that the executioner is one such person who is hiding their alignment, because they are called Triaga Hendrak. So there's this place has got a very much judge executioner. If you're bad, you any false move, you just get chopped head off, right? And the executioner is actually a lawful evil and is the head of the Thieves Guild and is hiding their alignment and is using it. And because they're head of the Thieves Guild and the executioner, they let people that are thieves that they don't like get caught so they can get rid of them. It's funny. Like, what an intriguing little, like, I mean, it's an awful being, but like as in person to be doing that, but interesting, like, little baddie to play around.
And that sort of it's selfish for their own means, which is not part of the common good, which is good. Well, that leads us quite nicely, if you don't mind, going on to the magical conditions.
Yes,
if that's okay. The big thing, there's 2 big things to note about magical conditions of Arcadia. First one, magic takes bloody ages. Twice as long to do anything. It's like ritual casting, because obviously everything needs to be fair and take the time and stuff like that. So your poor spellcasters are going to be like, fuck. It's just like, oh my god. So there's that. But also, you have to, as the caster, have good intentions behind your spells, otherwise they fail. So the idea, so the idea that, we need to kill this person for the good of the town, fireball. Like, you have to, like, manifest. Fireball. You have to manifest that thing. You can't be like, power word kill, because I want them to. But as a result, evil, like, spellcasters or people who have, like, malintent have to. It was a great quote here. Like, they have to like sort of sweeten their thoughts. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, everyone has to be super nice, but you're like, oh, it's like it's in Bridget Jones's Diary, it's called the jellyfish compliment, where it's like stinging, but it's obviously you can't say anything because it's too nice. Be like, oh, you cow.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how I imagine
like a neg, I guess.
Yeah, like a
negging.
negging. Yeah. So that's all spellcasters do to me now. When they're on Arcadia, they're like, I just wish you weren't here anymore, because then you could explore the rest of the world and don't do. It's like try and justify it. But I just thought that's a really cool thing, that you have to have good intentions. Like it has to be a benefit not for you, but
and
for the
to
greater
the larger
good
of the groups as well. So it's not just individual. If you're like gonna do something that's a spell that helps even a small group but will hinder a larger group, then it's very interesting. It is interesting, and DMs beware is kind of what I think, because you've got to really think about that.
The other quick thing as well is that illusionary magic, anything that's deceptive, won't work, because people will see straight through it, which I think is amazing. But like stuff like alter, like anything physical, I would assume was alright, but anything illusionary, people will see straight through.
Exactly. Which is kind of it's interesting. I can imagine like on that, in Marduk's realm of beauty, if you were going to use an illusionary magic to make something more beautiful, then maybe it might work. But again, that's something that you can DMs can do figure out themselves.
I mean, again, I can just imagine in that particular realm, it is Hot Fuzz, it is the village of the year, and they're trying their best, and if somebody goes, "Oh, it's fine, I'll just
gosh, it's Marduk and Bloom."
And they do a bit of glamour or something in it, but everyone sees through it, and they're like,
"Yes,
this won't work." Oh.
Yes. Talk about magical. There's some really interesting magical items to be had in Arcadia as well.
This is the first time I believe they've had realm or plane specific magical items that they've sort of mentioned in the book.
I think in the Abyss they had just the ability to make the blood ichor. They had the blood ichor, and they had the black metal, the iron swords and gear that you could buy.
Sure.
But it wasn't as particular as this. You're right. It was just, but they're the only other ones I could think of.
Yeah.
But they have the chains of light, which are appear to be designed by the power Ruorix, which is
one of the
which is the Kryn deity of dwarves. Or from, you can say it comes from Clandegan, wherever you're from, in terms of like wherever land you're using as your prime world. But they are shiny metallic chains, but when used to bind an evil creature, they glow with intensive light equal to the continued light spell. Those with evil or chaotic bend who lock upon this light must save versus spell or be blinded. And then you can see if the creature bound tries to escape the chain's heat or cool, depending on which will do more damage, causing 1d2 points of damage to the first round, etc. So basically, they are like like what they called?
Manacles.
Manacles.
Not mandibles. Yeah.
Not mandibles, because we just said mandibles.
Yeah.
And not stoke mandible.
No.
It's
manacles.
They are manacles, which are basically focus about using them on evil creatures, which if you're going to my theory, if you're going to battle or you're going to like the hells or something like that, could be a useful item, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's an all I was gonna say was that it's interesting. It mentions like they heat, which normally is what we go, oh yeah, that will definitely hurt. Because we've got heat metal and all that sort of thing. Or cool, depending on which does more damage. That's great, because obviously most demons, if it's a demon or it's a devil, they're going to have fire resistance. So I thought that was really interesting that they put that in there. And then there was the Van Braces, which are basically like a protection-based thing. That if you get hit by spells, for evil spells, then you get benefits from that. Again, I'm going to leave this a bit, skip this to link that to the dwarves very quickly. There's a very interesting point, because the dwarves are mustering always and off to fight, and it does say that the battle, the wording, I need to find the wording because it was kind of it was very well put. What it was saying about these dwarves are they have this war bands that they are preparing for war, and there is a thing a bit similar to Isgard, but there's also this note saying they haven't been seen yet, but the creatures of Archeron and Bata are dreading the day that dwarves come marching in on them. Oh. Because it's like they've got all these like amazingly powerful like abilities that can like fight evil, whatever it is, and so interesting like that, but they do send them out to battle, and it does say that Clan Geddon watches over the children who die in his name and gathers their spirits back to him whenever they die, even outside their realm, which is the only power that has that ability. However, he is the only one who knows this.
Yeah.
He doesn't tell any of his people, so that they go and die in battle, because if they did, their sacrifice is all the more noble because they think nothingness awaits them. And it just reminded me of that Isgard point where they're all going like, "Oh, the glory of battle, dying in battle," and they all know they're going to wake up in the morning.
Yeah, it's such an opposite, isn't it?
It just was interesting. I don't know. Not that I believe one is right or wrong. I just thought it was interesting that it felt Isgard felt so false, whilst and this one sort of plays on that.
I guess it is that sort of the noble death and all that thing, but of course, again, not to get too philosophical about it, but going back to that World War One analogy I did,
exactly.
That idea of like, oh, we'll be home before Christmas, and then awfulness, people on all fronts on that front. So I can imagine then suddenly like, oh, congratulations, you did it, and now you're back with me. I'll be like, I mean, again, it's different because those people who are inhabiting the plains, they know this is the law and they accept it. But to adventurers and people like myself will be like, that's cruel, that is wrong, So I think that's the thing. So there would be an interesting, again, story thing if this happened whilst a group of adventurers were seeing this dwarven god or visiting, going, wait, this is happening, and you don't, and maybe try and tell people, which then is chaotic because they're trying to disrupt the order of what's going on. So
it just is playing with, like, it does put you, as we again just keep saying it puts you on a point where you're going in Planescape to have to engage with philosophy on a level which is really, and I think if that's what you want to do, like, that's the theme of, I'd say, a Planescape is like Sigil and the factions are all about philosophies, and these planes themselves are all about a particular philosophy, and it's about how allowing your players to engage in that however they wish is really interesting, I think, and I think that's what's quite fun about it. Talking on a more simple note, it's Lord of the Rings, because all the mountains are conical, which just made me think of Tolkien sketches, because they all have little rings. It says they all have wreathed around by clouds and storms, so the little conical mountains with the little circular clouds around them. That was all. Just as a little nod to Lord of the Rings there.
No, I like that. Talking about slightly more problematic things.
Yes.
Let's talk about it.
let's go to go and finally the elephant in the room that is the Harmonia.
Yes. Yeah. So we kind of briefly talked about it before. They are seen, they're one of the factions of Sigil. They are sort of a police force and enforcers and stuff like that. And they do. This is one of their home. Well, this is their home plane, I guess, or where they have their headquarters on their second layer. And I will say this: did not expect this, but this again, we've kind of alluded to this through the whole thing. Something's not right in Arcadia, and this is it. And again, we have to do the whole thing about, obviously, this is a legacy sort of thing, like, stuff that people. It's stuff like this is not okay now, and we shouldn't be glorifying this sort of thing, but it is useful to know what was considered like, oh, this is part of the canon and stuff like that. So just have to
I think
do
it's
that big warning thing now.
There's a content warning. Yeah, it's definitely a content warning, because there are definitely elements of this which are very difficult conversations, and I think I don't know what the best wording to put it out there without sort of overly saying it, but I think there's content warnings for entrapment and enslavement and conditioning of people.
Yes.
And I think that's just said there. Yeah. I don't feel it's definitely not glorified in this at all. No. But it is definitely there, and it's something that
it's definitely something you would be careful and maybe talk about in a session 0.
Exactly.
Because I think springing it on adventurers would not be good. So
no, 100%. No, exactly. And even then, I would even question. I probably wouldn't even use it. I think you try and think of a more interesting way to make this work that's not using this, but it's worth it. It's there in the book. So
so this idea that these are training grounds run by the Harmonium, but also they are trying to convert chaotic creatures into being more lawful, and they do this by essentially forcing them to do so, like this conversion camps. Let's leave it there. Essentially, it's
Exactly.
and it's not fun reading.
it's well, and that's the thing. The thing that it's done is that because it is so evil, it has made this plane too evil, and therefore ungoodified it, and therefore made it more neutral, and still. But then it's so lawful in the sense that they're trying to deconvert the chaos of people, the dechaosify people, that it's shoved this third plane into Mechanis, because Mechanis is true neutral, but ultimate lawfulness. So by the removal of goodness and the addition of and the removal of chaos, it's pushed it into Mechanis,
which they don't realise at all.
And they don't realise, and they're doing it even more
to get it back,
because they think that's how they're going to get it back.
And so so in a sense, that whole story arc of why one of these planes is missing and it's affecting the whole thing I think it's a really interesting sort of thing.
It is, and it's like, if you want to get into that sort of like taking on a really horrible bunch of people, and you want that to be like the dark of this world, it could be a really interesting sort of like very heavy concept to play with, to sort of investigate. But as I wrote, holy shit, this is fucked up. Is the words I wrote. Like when I started reading, I went, what the fuck? I was like, I was not expecting that at all.
I wasn't, and again, it's that sense of, as we keep saying, something's not right, but I did not think it would be that bad at all.
No, I thought it was going to be something like someone broke something, like I don't know, or something like a demon lord has taken over, so it's gone chaotic, or I don't know, something random like that. Exactly.
So, but again, is that sort of thing where it's good to know about these things before you send your players to them, and then they're not surprised, but also you can work together to create a better narrative. As I think what I think is important here is that line was sort of said before. The plane itself is as perfect as it's going to be. The problem is the people on it. But I just think it just sums that up completely as a result. So essentially that is the most problematic bit of this plane. You could do with it what you wish, in a sense of like, don't use it at all, modify it to your heart's content, but it's good to know that this is a big because you can't get from reading it, you can't get away from it from just reading it from that planes of lore. So
yes, exactly. It's like
what a way to end.
Well, I don't know, is there any like, I think if people have the time, I think moving and looking more into the Heliopolis, which is the realm of the Egyptian gods, is really interesting. I just want to show. I know we might put the bit of art.
Oh no! Yeah, it's just a bit back. Yeah. There's sort of this triangle the triangle and of the three gods are having sort of equal thing, and then one god that sort of wanders all the way through. Really fascinating. Really interesting.
It's a really interesting place, so definitely worth looking at. And was there anywhere else? Do you have an also ran? That's my new term.
An also ran. Yeah. I quite like. We mentioned it very very briefly. This idea of mage rest. This place where they can do magic freely, then they don't have the same sort of restrictions that the rest of the plane does. So this idea that all these wizards are just, I don't know, practicing. It's because I've been reading Rivers of London, so they're all practicing like little light cantrips, but it's like, ooh, columns for me. Yeah. I can read at night, and nobody will know because I'm not disturbing their sleep.
And actually, there's a beautiful sentence about Azuth, which is the realm of the mage, and I think this is which is that there's this stair that goes all the way down in the base of this mountain where they live, and it says, when this endless stair finally reaches the bottom, the whole cavern of Azuth suddenly becomes visible. It's decorated with points of light dancing about the spires of the town in the centre of the miles across cave. There are all sorts of caves branching on from the main cavern that reach back hundreds of yards. Each one is slightly scarred by the effects of magic gone awry, but the tunnels heal themselves over time. Lights flash and a melody of noises sound, but the traveller need not fear for the results of the magical displays, for lingering over everything is the presence of the power.
Oh.
I don't know, it's just kind of like there's a nice beautiful sort of imagery of this like cave of magical exploration, you know, that sort of like wonderland of magic. That I think if you wanted to take your players somewhere, if you had like a Caleb like character, someone extremely invested and intrigued by arcane and magical like rituals and stuff like that, I think that would be a beautiful place to take them and let their character really enjoy themselves. Like going on Disneyland for mages, basically.
That's super cute.
Do you know what I mean? That's what it felt like to me. Like I kind of loved it, and so
I like
that was one of my favorite places.
No, I completely agree. The only final thing I was going to mention is obviously, again, going back to the 5e, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the optional rule. I think this is the weakest optional rule I've ever seen.
What is the option?
So it's called planar vitality. So whilst on this plane, creatures can't be frightened or poisoned, and they are immune to disease and poison. I don't know why. Exactly. I guess it doesn't, for me, it doesn't really make sense. I would probably do something like everything's ordered and stuff like that. So maybe I would actually put the spell casting in, that spells take twice as long, which I know seems very cruel, but I think like that. I think everything is ordered in some way, so everyone is always equal in some way. So I don't know that you'd even do it like everyone has the same number of attacks, or everyone but to make it fair on everyone has one, or only one attack or bonus action. Perhaps, I don't know. Like, I'd be cruel like that. But the planar vitality, I don't think it made very much sense there. So I think they've run out of things to say about those optional rules there.
Yeah, I think that is a bit of a shame one, because there was a couple that I thought were actually kind of interesting and still kept a lot of it. I think also, just to mention, if you want to learn more, we will talk about it next week. The other plane, the layer that has disappeared, but you can find that in the Arcadia book. And I did read it, and I think maybe we'll leave it. Should we leave it till then?
Let's leave it till then, because I think because we're like, well, where is this missing plane? So yes, so next time.
Fiona, where are we going next week then?
Well, Hamilton, as we've just seen the greater good of Arcadia, I thought we'd go to the clockwork Nevada of Mecanus, the plane of ultimate law and order and modrons.
Modrons.
I cannot wait.
I know. It's like literally we've been talking about modrons like every single time. We're like, when are we going to get to the modrons?
Yeah.
And what a good way to do it midway.
Yes. I think, that works.
We've actually got quite a good midway, halfway point. We get to do modrons, and then we get to go to hell.
Oh, no. Yes, indeed.
No,
so yes,
I know, exactly.
So yes, so next time, next time we'll talk all about Nirvana, as sometimes it's called, but yes, Mecanus.
Yeah.
That's where we're going next.
Yeah, we've got the Modron March, we've got Primus, we've got all these fantastic beings and places. And if you like cogs, if you're a cog fan, you're gonna all those cog fans out there are gonna get a good cog video in the background.
Oh, you like clock punk or whatever it's called, or steampunk? Yeah,
steampunk. Oh wow, you're a steampunk fan.
Get ready.
Like trains? You like trains? What else uses?
There's no
cogs.
There's no trains in Mecanus.
Like clocks.
Clock punk. Yeah. Okay, but until next time, folks. Until next time, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, catch up on previous episodes and VODs of our sibling show, the DM's Book Club. There'll be some links around here, and yes, until next time, thank you so much for tuning in, watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for dealing with us and the Emmerdale theme tune, which I don't know if we'll make the edit. But until next time, folks.
I want it all over the show. Just the backing music for the whole show to be that.
And until next time, for the greater good. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.